The chair lays out floor amendment number 2 by Senator Birdwell, Senator Patrick, Senator Wentworth, Senator Huffman, Senator Nelson. The secretary will read the caption, or the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Patrick, or Birdwell.
The chair recognizes Senator Birdwell to explain floor amendment 2.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment says that a person who is not authorized by law to be present in the United States may not be considered a resident of this state for the purposes of in-state tuition. This bill grandfathers students who have already completed at least 30 semester hours at an institution of higher education. Members, this bill does not prohibit anyone from attending our colleges and universities. It only seeks to treat all non-Texas residents the same. I move adoption.
Senator Van Putte, for what purpose do you rise?
Questions for the authors of the amendment?
Will Senator Birdwell yield?
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I will yield. Senator Van Putte.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator. Now, this provision in the Education Code was put into Texas statute in 2001.
I believe that's correct. Yes, ma'am.
And can you give me the breakdown of how many college students have been able to use this at our 4-year institutions versus the 2-year institutions?
Between the two, I do not know, but total, the LBB and Higher Education Coordinating Board estimate a little over 16,000 students.
And would it surprise you to know that the vast majority of these, and at least the last count we had was close to 12,000, use this to enter our community college systems?
Right, that 16,000 includes community colleges as well.
And Senator Birdwell, were you aware that the legislature passed this piece of the legislation? It went into effect with the consent of Governor Perry.
Yes, ma'am.
And were you aware, Senator, that the reason that this piece of legislation was done was after negotiations with then the chair of the Education Committee, who was Senator Bivens?
No, ma'am.
Well, Senator, would you be surprised to know that it took us 3 weeks to negotiate the actual portion of the language? And I'm going to see if so it can refresh your memory and you see what portions that you have opposition to. The way the Texas statute is written is the students who would qualify to pay the same rate as in-state tuition have to have attended Texas schools for over 3 years.
Yes, ma'am, I understand that.
You're aware of that. And that they also have to be able to sign an affidavit and say they will seek citizenship as soon as they can, because as you know, a minor child is not allowed to have the status to seek U.S. citizenship on their own.
Correct.
And you realize that the Texas Association of Business was strongly in favor of this due to the fact that many children were here brought at a very young age, had always attended Texas schools, and we had told our children, stay in school, study, be good, stay on track, and you can go to college. And many of these students would be the first students in their family not only to graduate from high school, but to go on to college, and you were aware of that.
Right, but this amendment does not preclude them from going to college. It simply requires all non-state, non-Texas citizens.
Well, what this does, though, is these children who were brought here, most of them at a very early age, had no say-so, and their parents came here for the opportunity. And by removing this, your amendment strikes at the heart of those children who are in our public school systems, who try to adhere to every rule, and yet when they get to the college age, that tuition is almost double of what they would pay, even though they graduated from Texas high school. So by your amendment, we're punishing the students, the children, because of a transgression of their parents. And what we were seeing was many of our class valedictorians, our class salutatorians, our now top 10 percenters were being offered and going out of state where they were welcomed because of the financial hardship of the difference between having in-state tuition status versus out-of-state.
That's correct, but my primary purpose here is to treat non-residents equally because my duty is to the citizens of the state of Texas.
What harm have you seen in the 11 years, or now 10 years, that we've passed this? What sort of egregious and uproars have we had to now go back to the status that we had prior to the legislation that you're seeking to overturn?
First, it would treat other students from other states equally as well. But most of all, it comes from having just recently been elected and seeing what I'm seeing in my district of folks that are very concerned about having their tax dollars taken to provide financial background or financial support to non-residents of the state of Texas. So for me, it's an issue associated with supporting the taxpayers of Texas,
Well, Senator Birdwell,
go ahead.
If that's your case, why don't you have an amendment that says that you don't need to educate students when they're here? Because what you're doing is you're putting a dagger in the heart and the hopes of these students who had no say-so whether they got here or not,
Right.
who have graduated from public schools or private schools, who have been here at least 3 years, and with all due respect, out-of-state students, if they meet the qualifications, they would have already been here 3 years. So they ascertain that they're going to apply for citizenship because they can't until they reach legal age.
Right.
They qualify to go into our public institutions, and they've at least been here 3 years. We wrote this specifically, and I have to tell you that it was 3.5 weeks of negotiations with, at the time, Chairman Bibbins, with members on this committee. What sort of, other than you don't think it's fair, has this caused terrible problems throughout the state to allow these now 16,000 students to have the opportunity to get an education so they can actually and become citizens and then be productive members here in Texas? What sort of things are going so wrong with the current statute?
The sense of fairness that you mentioned.
Senator, you leave me speechless. I have seen, I understand why this is, but this has worked well for the state of Texas, and in fact was the model for other states. Now, I understand the anti-immigrant rhetoric. I understand exactly why people and the fairness, we have withstood efforts every single time. But these are students who want the opportunity, who want to be U.S. citizens, who through no fault of their own were here. And now we're saying to them, because of something that their parents did, you don't deserve it. And they do. There are mechanisms for us to be inclusive. But if this state wants to have the attitude that it will close its doors to those who come, and particularly the children, then do an amendment to strike at the heart of them. Don't let them go to public schools in the first place. Don't give them health care. Don't let them do anything. Because what you're doing is you're saying it doesn't matter what you do in high school. It doesn't matter that you try. Because once you get out, we're going to treat you like you're from out of state. And they're not. Most of these students have been raised in this state, and they are proud members. And they are in communities throughout this state. And so, Senator, I hope that I understand, why you've done this. And I know it it plays well back home. But know how much it hurts those of us who have people in our districts who are law-abiding citizens and who respect the fact that someone wants to come here and they don't take it out on the kids. What your amendment does, takes it out on the children. And that doesn't give them the incentive to continue and to work as hard as they can in schools. I'm speechless. I have no other questions.
Senator, I remember when this went on, I didn't negotiate this. Several Republicans and others did. I think this bill passed. Senator Vanderputte can probably tell me, but 31-0 out of the Senate in a Republican-controlled Senate, and I think it was almost unanimous in the House and signed by the governor. And here's the policy reason behind it. These kids go to school. They're here not by their own choice. Their parents are here working in our communities for us. You go to a restaurant, these folks are washing your dishes, waiting your tables. You have a hailstorm and you need a roof put on. These folks are working in your community and they're putting roofs on. These people are working in the agriculture community. They're productive citizens. They're productive persons. They're not citizens. They're not here legally, but their children are here. We're required by the United States Constitution to educate those children, and we have, and we've invested in them. At least 3 years in high school. Last time I checked, that's about $5,000 a year. To deny them an opportunity to go into our community colleges, and I don't know if anybody here has checked about how this will impact some of the community colleges in Houston. I understand there are a lot in Houston that are educating these young people. These young people have worked hard to excel. They're not the problem that we're trying to solve with regard to illegal crime and drugs. These are kids that are just trying to reach the American dream. So I thought when I voted for it, it was a good conservative bill, a good conservative move, because it turns young people into productive persons, hopefully productive United States citizens. If you look at the demographics in this state, we're changing. It's a lot different than it was whenever I started and graduated from college. And to me, I think this is the wrong message to send to these young people who are currently in high school, working hard to try to better themselves, and to say here on the floor of the Texas Senate that we are not going to grant you an opportunity, or at least a fair opportunity to go to college. Many of these kids can't afford to pay out-of-state tuition. And I think about, what about the kids that really are good students? Kids that can grow up to be productive in this society here in Texas. This bill doesn't solve any problems, or this amendment does not solve any problems. It's symbolic. And I think the symbol is not one that we would be proud of. So I'm going to respectfully move to table the amendment at the proper moment.
I'm wondering, did you do any research as you prepared this amendment to determine what the cost has been? I think you said about 16,000 something plus students.
Right, approximately a total of a little over 16,000 students that would fall into this category.
Were you able to find out from anyone what that cost may be to the state of Texas?
Best estimates based upon individual decisions of those students that would come into the system, because the amendment does grandfather those currently in our institutions of higher education. But around $50 million a year, or nearly $100 million per biennium, is what it costs the Texas taxpayer to subsidize non-citizens of the state of Texas.
All right. And my other question is, your amendment does not, again, preclude them from entering institutions of higher education. Correct. And they'd still be they would still be required to undergo the same to be admitted, and if they were in the top 10%, all of that would still apply. It would just be that they would be responsible for a higher tuition rate of non-residents.
And they could even pursue additional student loans, other things associated with that. The amendment does not prohibit that in any way.
And secondly, I'm interested in thinking about how a non-resident is treated. So, I mean, if a person comes, say, from another country or another state, and they get a student visa, say, and they come to the state of Texas, and they come to one of our universities, they have to pay an out-of-state tuition rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So an individual who has gone through the legal process to come into our
Right.
country, but chooses to come to our university, has to pay the higher rate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But an individual who is here and does not have a legal status, and that is who you're after in this bill, is that correct? Just those individuals who do not have legal status in the United States, is that correct?
That's correct.
Then those are the individuals that you are seeking to require that they pay a non-resident rate.
That's correct.
All right. And does your amendment do anything else?
It grandfathers those currently in our institutions of higher education with the current status prior to the amendment being adopted.
All right. So those who had entered the institution with certain expectations would not be
Continue to
penalized. All right. Thank you,
Correct.
Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, ma'am.